Hello and welcome to the second lesson in the second phase or second session of our training, in which we're going to deal with Python programming language. So I believe by now each and everyone is able to install Python successfully as well as the packages we have installed in the previous videos without any issue. So in this particular lesson, we're just going to deal with basically some few Python's lines of commands and codes and how they are implemented, how they are written, things like how to declare our variables, how to take input from users. We're going to talk of comments, and then talking of maybe try except block, which is used for catching errors in our programs and all that. So after that, in the next lesson, then we are going to start implementing our algorithms we wrote in the first session in real programming language, and for that matter Python. So all the algorithms we wrote or we designed in the first phase, we are going to write them in Python, and we see how they work. Although we are going to write them without the GUI, that is a graphical user interface. We're going to be writing them and then running them in the console here. If you write a program and then you are able to run it successfully and it displays in the console here, which it means with this particular message process finished with exit code 0, it means the program can run successfully on any platform without any issue. So basically that is that. So let's see how we can start. We talk of variables. So let's see, and then we also deal with how to name our variables, which we call identifiers and all that. So by now variables shouldn't be a problem for us. So in naming them, to be know the do's and don'ts, and then we know the good practices involved in naming our variables. So we are going to implement it here, and then we'll be good to go. So let's try something like that. So we're going to use a typical example. Okay, we are going to just declare a variable and then assign it to something. Then, like I said, after writing a variable or declaring a variable and you assign a value to it, when you run or you call you call the variable in a print statement in Python, you only see the value of the variable and not the name. So let's see how that happens. So let's say we want to take first name, maybe declare a variable called first name. So you see first, sorry, I want to capitalize it. Okay, I'll just make it this way, first name. Then maybe I want it to be just a name, so first name is equal to John. Sorry, say John. Now when I call to print, but before we do that, let's just look at how we display something in Python, although we've already seen that after installation of our Python. So let's see what the print function does in Python. In Python, the print function displays whatever you put in the parentheses and inside the quotation. So for example, let's say print, print, then into bracket, then we say come. So now when we write something like this, when we run something like this, we should see come in the console. So this is it. So the same way, if you write maybe print, then into brackets, then you say I love programming. If you run it in the console, it should print I love programming. So maybe print whatever you put in between the parentheses and in the quotations. So we're going to have it displayed in here. So we're going to have something like say okay, let's see. So coding is interesting. So when we run it, we should have it like there. And we also talk of our programs running, or maybe running line by line. When you run your program, the first, it will check and go through the first line of code and run it successfully, come to the second one and run it. So you can see that it has been displayed like that. So when we copy this, or maybe let's just cut it from here and paste it here a second, and then let's run it and see what happens here. You see that it gets executed before this one. So that is how programs are run. It doesn't skip any line. After running the first one, then come to the second one and run it, come to the third one and run it, and all that. So basically that is how we display something in the console on or in Python programming language. So here now let's talk of our variables once again. So I was trying to collect a first name from a user and then display the name. So let's see how that happens. So you say, sorry, first name. So you can see that as I was typing the name, I use the camel case where the first letter of the word first with a capital letter and then the name with a capital letter. I could have also used all lowercase maybe and then use the underscore to separate it. It's also accepted. Just the good practices we learn in the first session, the same thing applies here. So we're going to say, let's say king. So when I run this, actually nothing will happen because we are not going to, we haven't, we didn't call for the variable. So to display this name, we say print into brackets, sorry, into brackets, then we say the name of the variable. So we call it and then run it. So when we run it, we should see king printed here. So you can see that this is the name of the variable and this is the value. So when you run the program, you don't see the name of the variable first name, but rather you see what the value of it, which is king. So that is what we are seeing here. Here, this is it. King is here. Something like this. This is it. It's printed here for us to see without any issue and all that. So basically, that is that. Let's try declare another variable using a different thing. So let's see. Let's say let's use the last name. So last we use underscore here. Name is equal to, let's say, Solomon. So when we run it, nothing will happen. So we just have to print and say, then we call the variable name is the last name. When we run it, we should see Solomon printed in the console here. So that is how variables are called after they are declared. So whenever you call the name of the variable, the value is what you are looking for, not the name. So that is that. Now let's try using the one of the algorithms the program we wrote, which has to do with concatenation, where we talk of there's a man called John. He is 70 years old. He likes the name John, but doesn't like to be 70 or something like that stuff. If you can remember. So let's try checking on something like that. But before we do that, we're going to declare the name of the person, the variable name, and then the age, so that we see how useful variables can be in our programs. So first of all, we're going to take the name. You can call him John, and then his age is what, 75 or any age at all, maybe 90 or 100. The name can be anything at all. So that is that. So let's say the name should be Johnson or whatever. So we take the name first. So we declare the variable for the name. We say name. So we say first, so we say name is equal to, so we say maybe Johnson. Then after that, we take the variable age, or we declare the variable age and say age is equal to, let's say, 95. And all okay, yes, 95. So now what we are going to do is you're going to write some simple story about John, such as there is a man called John, and then he is 95 years old. He likes Johnson. He likes the name Johnson, and then doesn't like to be 95. So all this is going to be in a print statement. So in here we're going to see how we can concatenate. That is concatenation, where we are going to be concatenating a variable with the various strings. So let's see how that happens. So we call the print function, say print. So we begin. So in the print statement, don't forget, after writing the print function or typing the print function, you open the parentheses. Don't forget of the quotation marks before you write whatever you want to display in the console. So you say there is a man. There is a man called. In here, we are not going to write the man's name. We're going to write the name of the variable. Don't forget of that. You say there's a man called. So we say plus. So we are concatenating it to what the variable name plus. So it's a name. So that is that, right? So that is the first line. So we go to the second line. So this will run, when we run it, this will print there's a man called Johnson. Don't forget of that. So we go for the second line. Say he is 95 years old, right? So we say he is so here we are going to concatenate what do you call it, the age to the other strings. So we are concatenating it first to he is. So plus age plus say years old. Sorry, this should be a string plus this should be a string years old. So basically that is that. So this will run, when we run it say he is, then it will say 95 years old. So let's go to the third line. So we say print, he likes the name Johnson, right? So that is it. He likes the name plus name, right? Plus name. So it will print he likes the name Johnson. Let me just close this white space here and here too as well. He likes the name but doesn't like to be 95. So we go to print again. So print, so we say sorry, but doesn't like to be plus age. So when we run this program, now you can see that the age here is selected. Now what happens in Python is this: we don't concatenate, we can only concatenate strings with variables. So this is a string and a variable. We can also concatenate string to string, but we don't concatenate strings to integers or float. So in here, this particular number is an integer. So Python is expecting what? I say, look, just when you hover your mouse over it, you can see say expected type string got int instead. What it's saying here is that it is expecting what? A string and not what? Integer. So we're going to do some little hack here to deceive the Python that actually what we have there is a string. So we're going to use the str keyword to predefine this, to change it to what? A string. But in other words, it is not a string. What is stored inside it is what? Actually what? An integer. So how do we do that? So we use the str keyword, str into brackets. So before I even introduce that, when I run this, there should be an error. Let me run it for us to see the error first before we come and then correct it. Else we wouldn't appreciate this. So let's run it, and then you see that there is an error. So that is what? The first line, line 6. Say what? Track back most recent call, call last file. So it is telling us it's in line 6. Say what? Print he is age years old. So the age here is the question. So they say what? Type error can only concatenate string and not integers. Not only integers, and float as well. We don't concatenate float with what? Strings, or integers with strings. So to do that, when you get to the points where you have your integer variable, then you have to what? Predefine it with what? Either the float keyword or the str, which means the string keyword. So let's do that and then correct our problem. So let's go for the str. What we have here is the string. So we just so into brackets. So here we have str, then into brackets, then we close another bracket here. So now when we run it, we should be able to go through this. Good. So we said there's a man called Johnson. He is 95 years old. You can see that the 95 is what? Joined with the years old. This is because, let me see, after the inverted commas, there should be a space between the inverted commas and then the years, or the next word that will come after the inverted commas. That is from the left side heading towards the right side. It was closed here because of the 95. It was like this. So I have to maybe give a white space there. So when I rerun it, it should be a change. It should now very good. Now it's working perfectly. There's a man called Johnson. He is what? 95 years old. He likes the name Johnson, but doesn't like to be what? 95. So you can see that in here we didn't write what? The name, but we just call the variable name. When we run it, it will just display the name there. Now let's see how useful Python can be. Let's see that we want to change our story to what? John. Let's say Mohammed, and then his age is what? 65. So if these lines of code, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If it were to be 95 lines of code, or maybe 100 lines of code, What we should have been doing is to go through them and see if there is name Mohammed, then we change the name Mohammed, then we change the age to 65. Instead of Johnson, we change it to Mohammed, right? Because we are now changing the story to Mohammed and not Johnson. So we keep changing like that till what? The 100th line of code. So you can see that that will be boring. And now, because we have already captured them in a variable, to change anything at all, just come to the value and change the value of the variable, and then when you run it, the changes takes effect. So let's change here to what? Mohammed. So there you see the importance of what? Variables. So Mohammed, and then age is 65. So now we are done. Even if it is billions lines of code, we are done changing everything in it. So when you run it, you should say Mohammed now and not. So you say there's a man called Mohammed. He is 65 years old. He likes the name Mohammed, but doesn't like to be 65. So you can see, even if it is billions lines of code, let's just do this. Sorry, I want to copy this and paste. So copy, paste, 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 paste. Now with all this, if I should run it, we will have Mohammed and 65 everywhere. So you can see. So imagine if these lines of code were to be billion, and each and every line of code there is Mohammed and what? What's the name? The age and all that. So you can see that to go through them and change it to be very boring. So we have to just maybe declare a variable and store them there. So whenever we want to do some changes, you just come to the variable, you do the change, you change the value of the variable, and then it takes effect. So let's change it to Kofi again now. So we say Kofi. So his age is what? 200 years old. So 200, sorry. So when you run it, you wouldn't have Mohammed, you should have Kofi now. So you can see everywhere you go Kofi, and then 200 and all that. So you can see how useful variables can be. So basically, this is how important variables are for us in the program. Now, let's look at the next thing. Now, in programming, we have something we call comments. Now, what does comments do in programming? We use comments to explain our lines of code. You know, as we write programs, what happens is you can write a program today, and within some couple of time, maybe months, weeks to come, you forget what a block or a line of code does. In fact, you have written it, but you forget, because a lot of things happen. You think of other things when you're not with the PC. You think of other, so you come to sit in front of the PC. For you to find out the work of the line of code is a problem. Some of the codes, programmers don't write them. They go to the programming language library and copy them and paste them. So what they do is, after doing that, they have to pass a comment on it to explain what the line of code does. So the next time they come, with the comments at the top there, they'll be able to know what that line of code is doing over there, or what it does. And also, one of the importance of comment in programming is not only in Python, in every programming languages, we have how we write our comments. Even in HTML and CSS, those who had training with us, the free training concerning HTML and CSS, you saw how comments are passed in there. So the same thing applies to any other programming language. And comments are very useful. They help other programmers to also read your code and understand what they do. So even if there is some changes they would want to do in the near future, without you being there, with a comment on the importance or the key codes or lines of codes there, they'll be able to read the comment and understand what that happens. So let's see how comments are passed in Python. So, and normally they are also just like codes written, but then they are not executable. When you run it, you don't see the comment. So we prefix with what? The hash tag, the hash sign rather. So we say this is, sorry, just a print statement. Sorry. So now this is just a comment, right? So before you pass a comment, you start with the hashtag, and then you write the comment or whatever you want to write, or whatever explanation you want to give about a line of code. So you do that. So when you run this, you shouldn't see it. It doesn't appear. So you can see it doesn't appear. It's just a comment. So you can see that the color of it is even different. So even if I should copy it and then paste it in the middle or somewhere, say let's copy this, paste it somewhere here. When I run it, it wouldn't show. So this is it. You can see it's not there. It's just a comment, and it's just telling us what this are. It says what? It's just a print statement and then nothing else. So that is how comments are useful in our program. So now let's see how we take inputs from users and then we display output or whatever we want to do. So let's take a name and then the age from a user. We prompt the user to enter their name and they enter their age. Then we take these two and then display something. Maybe you can say his name is so and so, he's so and so years old or something like that. So let's see how you take input from a user. Before you take an input, you have to declare a variable where the input will be stored. So let's declare a variable called name. So after that, we assign it to a value. So the value is the user who is going to enter that. So to take an input from a user in Python, we use the input keyword. So you say input, then you open your parentheses. So you tell them what you want to take. So you bring your this and say enter your name. So when I run this program, you see that it will be prompting me to enter my name. So check something here. So you see here, I can type my name here and hit enter, and then the next thing that the program will demand for me, I'll type it, hit enter, and then it will be executed in that order. So here it's prompting me to what? Enter my name. So you can see that what we have just written here, first of all, before we take an input from a user, we have to what? Declare a variable where the input is going to be stored. And don't forget, here I'm taking a name, so you can see that the variable is what? Name. I don't go maybe using something different to name what a name. So in fact, it doesn't make sense. So our variables names must be what? Must be familiar to what the input we are taking. I hope you understand what I'm talking about here. Good. So the next thing I'm going to take is what? The age. So I'll say age, then it's equal to input. I was trying to explain something here, and then I say enter your age. So if I should run this again, okay, it's already running. Let me stop it. Good. So now check something. Maybe if I enter my name, hit enter, say enter age, then I'll enter age maybe 67, then I hit enter, and then whatever command I want it to follow, then it gets executed in that order. Let me stop it. Now let's check something here. Now after taking the name and then the age, we want to use it to do something, right? We want to display some message for it. So to do that, we can say print. Let me explain this for you to understand once again. What is happening here is this is what we see, and then we tend to see programming to be difficult. Actually it is not, although it's challenging, but it is not impossible for us to learn. Let's take note of that. So what we are doing here, we want to take an input from a user, and what is the input for? It's just a name, right, and age. These are the two inputs we are taking from our user. So we have to prompt them. So in our pseudocode that we're writing, this is what you see, write, enter name. So with this will display. So at the moment where you begin typing in the name, you are inputting the name. So basically that is that. So before you prompt the user to give you something, you have to declare a variable for it. So that is what we have done, where the name is going to be stored, or the input is going to be stored. So we use the input keyword to what? To take input from the user in Python. Then after calling your input keyword, you open a bracket, then you open your inverted commas. So we call them parentheses here. You open your inverted commas, then you type in what? A message telling them what you want. So that is what we have just done here. So we are done with that. So after taking these two inputs, we want to display some little message, say print. So we say into bracket, his name is something, and then whatever he is, something is old. So we say name is. So we want to concatenate it to what? The variable name. Go to the second line, say print. He is. Then we go to plus. So don't forget the age here is going to be is an integer, although, but here we want to make it what? A string. So we say what? Okay, now let me check something here. Good. So let's say age, right? Then plus he is age plus years, sorry, plus let me give a space here, years old. So when we run this program, now you can see that here we don't have any error. Have you seen it? Because it's a string automatically here, because what we are taking here looks like a string, although it's an integer. But to Python now is a string. But the initial one, the reason why there is an error here is that we've already declared them as what? Float. So when you call this variable, the float has already been stored in it. So before you can deceive Python, you have to use the str keyword to change it to what? Behave as if you've changed the float or the integer to what? To a string, because you don't concatenate float and integers with strings. We can only concatenate integers and variables, strings and variables. So in this case, we are concatenating strings and variables. This is a variable, this is a variable. We are concatenating them together. So I pray you understand what I'm talking about here. So let's run the program first. So it says what? Enter name. So I enter name King. Enter age. Then after entering the name, you hit enter. Then you go for the next input. So age is what? 100. When I hit enter, I should see the message. He is what? His name is King. He is 100 years old. So basically, that is that. You just take the input from the user, then you use it to display a message or whatever you want to use it for. So basically, that is that. This is how we take input from a user. Let me explain that again. Before you take an input, you have to declare a variable where the input is going to be stored. So we use that the name here. Use the input keyword, you open your parentheses, then you type in the message prompting them to enter what you want. So that is that. So this is how we take input from what? A user. Now let's look at the basically the last thing before we proceed, and that is there's something we call try except block. Try except block. Now what is a try except block? This is used for what? Catching errors in our program. For example, if you call for an input from a user, or you demand for an input from a user, what happens is that how sure are you that what you are demanding is what the user is going to input or enter for you? Sometimes you can be demanding for an integer and then the user will enter a string. And normally what we normally see in some programs is that when that happens, the program suddenly closes by itself. That shouldn't be the case. If it happens like that, the program should be able to stand the error and display the error message for the user to see that, oh, this is the cause of what? My problem. So let me just correct it and then I'll be good to go. So you see that? So that is what we term as what? Try except block. We use the try except block to what? Catch some errors. So let's see how that happens. We started with what? The try keyword. The try keyword. So we say try. Then what do you want to try? Let's say we want to prompt the user to enter an integer. So you can see that since we are prompting the user to enter an integer, if the user should enter something like a string, there should be an error, right? So we try to catch the error. So let's see something first. Say what? Number. Let me declare the variable and then take the input from the user. Say int. We want to take an what is the name? Integer from the user. So very good. Let me just explain something like this. When we were declaring our variables in pseudocodes and then in our algorithms, declaring them as float and integer. So if you want to take a float or integer from a user, first of all, just like how we take any other input, first of all declare a variable where the input is going to be stored. If it is a float, after the equal sign, if you want to assign the value, you bring the float keyword. The float keyword. Then you open your bracket, then you bring the input keyword now. So whatever the user inputs here, then you say enter the number. So whatever the user inputs here is going to be what? A float. If you want to take an integer, this is how it should be int. So use the int keyword. So whatever the user puts in there is going to be what? An integer. So that is that. Here we are going to take an integer from the user. So let's see what happens if the user enters something aside integer. So after taking the integer, you print the integer, right? So say print bracket the number we are taking from the user. So that is that. Let's run the program and see what happens here. So here we want to take an integer. So let's take something like the ball, okay, then which is a string. So let's run it. So you can see that there's an error. We have already declared this as what? An integer. We are taking an integer from a user. And now the user mistakenly, maybe he doesn't know that what we are taking here is an integer. So the user may be mistakenly, maybe even though he knows, by typing errors and all that, anything at all can happen, he accidentally enters a character. Let's say even there. Let me just change. This is even too long. Let me just put T or Y. Accidentally put in some what character like Y. Maybe the person wants to type in 7, accidentally put in Y. 7 is an integer, it should have accepted if it is 7. So let's take the input 7 and see. So 7, the number. So you can see that it has displayed the number, right, which is perfect. So the user can make a mistake and enter what? A character. Let's do that. See, we've already done, we saw the error, so maybe, sorry, U. So wrong. So it has displayed an error. So if this is a real program, executable program somewhere on a different machine, this program will suddenly close because of this error. And someone using a program who doesn't know anything about programming, and this happens, in fact, frustration will set in there. So as a programmer, I should be able to catch this error and let them know that, hey, this is what is happening. This is the cause of this particular error. So you have to correct it yourself. So to do that, we use something we call try except what? Error. Something we call try except error. So you can see the error, say what? Value error. It means the value we need here is not a string, but rather what? An integer. So let's go ahead and then say what? Invalid lateral for int. So they needed int, and then we put in what? A character. So which is not accepted. So let's see how we can use the try except block to catch this error. So to do that, we use the try keyword here. See, try. Have this. So to make this work, we're going to indent this. So you select and then tab over it. So it's inside the try except block. Have you seen it? So with this, I'm going to say except. Sorry, except. Let's say this. We have it here. Except what? Let's say except which kind of error? Except, let's say, value error. So we want to display something and tell the user that it is what? Value error. Except that the user enters something. So we have to try this. We are putting it inside. We are checking the error to find out. So to do that, we use a try except block. So what we are saying is that we are trying something here for the user. In case the user enters something which is wrong, except that wrong, we want this message to be displayed. So we say print. Then into brackets. So we say, then we tell them the reason behind the error. So we say what? Value error. So that one can be a string. So we say value error. So in that case, it wouldn't display these plenty things here again. It would rather tell them the what do you call it? The type of error by itself, just like that. So let's run it and see something here. So we say enter number. So let's enter character. So you can see that those plenty writings in red and blue things, which is very frustrating, they didn't come here. They say what? Value error. So with this, you'll be able to know that the value you're supposed to enter, you didn't enter, you've entered the wrong thing. So it says what? Value error. So this has catched the error. It wouldn't display those long thing again. So with the long thing over there, what happens is that, like I said, if it's a real program, it will just end and then close by itself, which is frustrating, right? It can be frustrating to anybody at all. So that is that. To catch this type of errors, we use the try except block. So now let's check something here once again. So why don't we even make our message very clear? Enter an integer. So we need an integer instead. So tell the user, after saying value error, someone can still not understand this. You understand? Because even W is also what? A value. But what type of value is it? It's a character here. So you can say that we need an integer instead. So you say we need an integer instead. So let's run it and see. So we type in T. Say what? Value error. We need an integer. So this message to display for the user to see that, hey, this is what they need. So the next time the user run the program again, and then maybe enter 3, the program should be able to work. Display what? The 3 here. So that is how we catch errors in our program. We can catch multiple errors in our what they call it, programs and all that. So basically, to our level here as beginners, this is what we need to know. We can catch errors like that, so that in fact the program doesn't yell at you and close all of a sudden. So basically, that is that. So these are some of the few things we need to know before we begin expressing our algorithms in Python programming language. So the next lesson, we're going to start expressing our algorithms that we wrote in pseudocode and in flowchart in the first session in Python programming language. So till then, I say thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.